Continuing with the Cartesian coordinate system, we're going to talk about the distance and midpoint formulas. The first thing that we want to do is figure out where the distance formula actually comes from. So let's just take two arbitrary points in the coordinate system. It doesn't really matter what they are. Let's call this one x1, y1. And then let's call this one x2, y2. Okay, so it doesn't really matter what they are. We just want to call them something arbitrary. And what I want to do is connect them like this. What we just created is a right angle. And if you remember, this is the Pythagorean theorem, which states that the sum of the squares of the two legs of a right triangle is equal to the square of the hypotenuse. This side is called the hypotenuse. We're going to call this side D, because that's what we want to know, the distance between the 2 points. Okay, so if we do that, I want to know the distance between here and this point right here. Well, what is this point right here? This is the point. X is actually in line with this X, so this is the point x1, and Y is in line with this one, so y2. I don't know that we're really going to need that at this point, but at least you'll see what's going on. So the distance between these 2 points will be y2 minus y1. Since distance is positive, we're going to put it in absolute value. Okay, the distance between these 2 points will be x1 minus x2. Okay, so if we use the Pythagorean theorem, we can say that this side squared plus this side squared is equal to this side squared. So what we're going to have is, I'm going to exchange the 2 and the 1 because it doesn't really matter which order they're in for the distance formula. So x2 minus x1 all squared plus, that's this side squared, now we're going to do this side squared, plus y2 minus y1 all squared equals this side squared, so equals d squared. Well, to solve this equation for d, you need to take the square root of both sides. So the distance is equal to the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. This is your distance formula. Okay, so let's see how that works. Oh, here it is. I just wanted to show that to you in real terms instead of my terms. The next thing that we're going to look at is called the midpoint formula. Well, where does the midpoint formula come from? We're going to do kind of the same thing on this one. We want to know the midpoint of this line segment. So I'm still going to connect these with a right triangle. Pretend like that's a right triangle. Okay, so let's call this point x2, y2, because it doesn't really matter which one's which. Let's call this point x1, y1. So again, this point here is called x2, y1. Alright, so if I wanted to know the midpoint of this segment, what's between these two? It would be halfway between the two y coordinates, right? So this midpoint will be the same x coordinate as these two, so it would be x2. However, the y coordinate would be halfway between the two y coordinates here. So you could say y1 plus y2 cut in half. Does that make sense? We find this distance, so we add up this y value plus this y value and then cut it in half, and that'll tell us this one. Okay, we're going to do the same idea here. For this one, your y coordinate is the same as these two y coordinates, so you have your y1. However, your x coordinate of this midpoint will be halfway between x1 and x2. So you're going to say x2 plus x1 divided by 2. So you just cut that one in half. Well, if you were to join these, that would give you your midpoint right here. Well, this point uses coordinates from these 2 points. Your x coordinate is going to be this one because that's where it's landing, right? So your x coordinate is x2 plus x1, or x1 plus x2, doesn't matter, divided by 2, comma, and this y corresponds to this y. So that would be y1 plus y2 divided by 2. So to get the midpoint between 2 points, what you really want to do is add the x coordinates and divide them by 2, add the y coordinates and divide them by 2, and that'll be your midpoint. Okay, let's use all this. Figure out what's going on. So we want to find the distance between these 2 points. So for A, we're going to use the distance formula, which was x2 minus x1 all squared plus y2 minus y1 all squared, and you have to take the square root of that. So you're going to end up with the square root of, remember it doesn't matter which one goes first. So I'll just say it this way, x2 minus x1, so 2 minus a negative 3, plus 0 minus 4. Well, 2 minus negative 3 is 2 plus 3. 2 plus 3 is 5, and 5 squared is 25. 0 minus 4 is negative 4, and negative 4 squared is 16. 25 and 16 will give you 41. And we don't know the square root of 41, so the distance between those 2 points is 41. Okay, so what if we wanted to find the midpoint between these same 2 points, right? So you use your formula. Your formula is x1 plus x2 divided by 2, and y1 plus y2 divided by 2. So fill in the formula, 0 minus 3 over 2, and 2 plus 4 over 2. So this will end up being 0 minus 3 is negative 3. Negative 3 over 2 is just that, negative 3 halves. And then 2 plus 4 is 6, and 6 divided by 2 is 3. So the midpoint of the line segment that joins these 2 points would be negative 3 halves 3.